49,000 Americans, some civilians, some with military backgrounds, here to support the United States Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and U.S. Flag Merchant Marine. It's my great pleasure this afternoon to kick off this program to discuss really a magnificent, it appears, treatment for the hundreds of thousands who are suffering from some form of traumatic brain injury in this country. To begin the program, I'm going to introduce Retired Admiral Tim Fanning.
Thank you, Phil. This afternoon, what we're going to do is kind of have a free-ranging discussion on hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatment. And what we'd like to do is we're going to have the speaker come up to the podium, and later, if anyone on the panel wants to ask a question, either of the speaker or later, just raise your hand and we'll get it up. But this will run for approximately 1 hour, and we're glad to have you all here, and hope you can stay for the reception that starts at 5. Now first, I'd like to introduce Brigadier General, U.S. Army retired, Pat Maney, who will tell you his experience after having suffered a terrific TBI. Pat?
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name's Pat Maney. I'm just another broken soldier, and I want to thank the Navy League for sponsoring this event. This is a huge step forward for those of us who have experienced traumatic brain injury. I was a general, a reserve general who was mobilized and deployed to Afghanistan. I was there for 17 months. I got blown up, as they said. My bell was rung on August 21st, 2005. I spent almost the next 20 months at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. You know, under the Army regulations, you can only be broken for a year, and then they kick you out. So I had been there about a year when a friend of mine suggested I try hyperbaric oxygen. Now, when I tell you I'm broken, let me take just a moment to kind of describe that. I was awake, I could walk, I could talk with some hesitation, but I basically looked okay. The problem, of course, is the brain is inside the head and not outside. Or maybe that's a good thing, but that's the way we're built. And my wife literally led me around everywhere I went. I couldn't remember how to go places, what I was supposed to do when I got there. I couldn't carry on conversations. There were these long, pregnant pauses while I tried to find words. One time she took me, always leading me, to the commissary. And you know how you get to the end of the aisle and turn and go down another aisle? She turned and I didn't see her turn, and I was lost. I literally stood there because I couldn't figure out how to solve that problem and go somewhere else. One time I was at the Bethesda Naval Hospital gas station, pulled up, got out of the car, opened the gas cap, put the nozzle in, and had no idea how to pump gas from a self-service pump. I was in uniform, so you can imagine the surprise of the lady on the other side of the pump when I asked her how to turn on the gas pump. But that's what a brain injury does. You can look all right. You can kind of function. You can walk and talk, maybe. But you're not there. And hyperbaric oxygen has totally turned that around for me. A doctor friend suggested it. I received treatment at George Washington Medical Center here in Washington. And, you know, what Admiral Fanning didn't say is in civilian life, I have a job as a judge. I'm an elected judge. And I knew that I was not only losing my Army career, but I was going to lose my civilian career because I couldn't function. So hyperbaric allowed me to go back to work. And I kind of, because of my personal experience, I saw and was able to recognize litigants and defendants who came before me who had traumatic brain injury. And I started looking into our jail population. Over 10% of the county jail in the county where I live are veterans. And I noticed that many of those had traumatic brain injury from, not just from this war. We had one that had been shot in the head in Panama. And of course, at the time of the Noriega, the time we removed Noriega in Panama in 1989, there wasn't a diagnosis for traumatic brain injury. I say that only because we've got many, many, many people in our society with traumatic brain injury. Many soldiers, even from this war, who are not diagnosed. And it just seems to me very important for all of us to try to join this coalition for hyperbaric oxygen. When I had hyperbaric, it's cumulative, you know. You don't notice any difference after any one treatment. Yeah, you get up and you leave. But the cumulative effect is amazing. After about 8 dives, 8 treatments, my wife thought she noticed I was getting better, but she didn't say anything because she wanted me to get better and she was afraid she was seeing something because she wanted it, not because it was real. After about 12 dives, I started thinking I was getting better, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to raise my wife's hope. After about 20 dives, people who knew me before the injury and people who knew me after the injury started saying, "You look better. You're more engaged. You're talking in sentences and paragraphs." And that was a major difference. I mean, I've always been a reader. I couldn't read a paragraph and know what the first sentence was by the time I got to the last sentence. I couldn't balance a checkbook. I could write a check, but I had no idea what the numbers were, how to do simple subtraction. I couldn't concentrate long enough to watch a television show, so I would channel surf all the time. Drove my wife crazy. I couldn't sleep, so I was up at 2 or 3 in the morning. That also drove my wife crazy. So I guess part of that story is hyperbaric oxygen made my wife's life much better. And I think it's important, and I think some of the people here on this panel will tell you that a lot of these situations have 2 sides. The patient's side with its frustrations and the caregiver's side with its frustrations. And when hyperbaric oxygen does its magic, the frustrations go back to normal and diminish. So thank you for coming, and thanks to the Navy League for having this, and I hope everybody will consider learning more about hyperbaric and joining this really crusade, this critical crusade to take care of America's wounded warriors.
Does anyone have any specific question for Pat? Okay, next, I'd like to introduce Robin Reed. She is the president and CEO of the National Foundation for Women Legislators.
We have a little obstacle course we have to get past here. Good afternoon. I'm Robin Reed, National Foundation for Women Legislators, CEO and President. And I have to tell you that I'm eternally grateful for what hyperbaric has done for me. It was just after the 4th of July 2 years ago that I had spent the morning with disabled American veterans. I was so passionate about what they were doing. Is this picking up well?
Yes.
I was so passionate about what they were doing that I'd gotten very, very intense because they'd helped my father, who was a World War II veteran. So I was very, very involved in that particular morning, very intense. I had lunch with my husband and went back from lunch to the office, was talking to my mother's caregiver, and I realized that my voice was changing, and I started to drool, and my whole left side went stiff. And my assistant said, Sam, something's wrong. Of course, they called 911 immediately. I went to this very excellent hospital where Ronald Reagan had been treated. I had wonderful emergency room care. It couldn't have been any better. But when we finished with the emergency room care, Sam said to the head neurologist, who at the time was snapping her gum and being very flippant, actually called her a twit, who had just adopted a little baby, a young thing. And she was snapping her gum, and had I been able to speak, I would have patted her on the hand and said, my dear, my mother would think you'd be more credible if you'd stop popping your gum. But of course I couldn't speak or walk at the time. And so Sam had just asked her what's next, and she said, oh well, we'll send her over to gerontology. You know, they can't walk or talk over there either. She won't mind. And he said something that we have to believe. He said, bullshit. And actually, because he'd been an NFL football player, Denver Bronco, he knew about hyperbaric chambers because so many of the NFL players have them. But finding one was a real problem. He asked her, what about a hyperbaric chamber? She said, absolutely not. Of course, they have many of them at George Washington University Hospital, but they wouldn't let me use one. She said, there's no evidence that shows that they can be helpful at all for brain injury. The doctors there had said I had the most massive stroke they'd ever seen at George Washington Hospital, right in the middle of the brain. They had administered TPA immediately in the emergency room, but the care after the emergency room was the real problem. So we did something sort of unconventional. Sam remembered somebody named Bill Duncan, and we found Steve Reimer. He didn't have anything set up for us at the time. He and Dr. Mosiani worked together. I actually went to his warehouse. We shouldn't tell that, should we? And it was July, and there was no air conditioning. But through the glass in this wonderful hyperbaric chamber, I read my spiritual things. And it was amazing. I did notice a difference. I would sort of limp in and come out. I had 40 treatments, then we did the pause. And then Steve Reimer and Dr. Mosiani were able to do something a little unconventional for me so that I could continue the treatments. Because 6 weeks after my massive stroke, I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and ran a conference of about 500 elected women. And I spoke at every single plenary session. My women were so shocked that this massive thing had happened to me. And so, but the interesting thing is that they did take 2 hyperbaric chambers down in the semi to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we were on a Native American Indian reservation at the time, a pueblo, lovely resort area. And they were so impressed with me because they'd known me for years and years and years that they actually bought the hyperbaric chambers and are now using them on the Indian reservation. I did have a little interruption and have had just a slight regression since I did the 40 treatments and the interruption and 40 more. But I'm back in the hyperbaric chamber and improving daily. I cannot tell you how important it is, not just for our wounded veterans, but those that are trying to help them and that are passionate about it and trying to continue with our lives. I'm still an active president and CEO of the National Foundation for Women Legislators. And I'm very, very grateful for the hyperbaric chamber treatments that I received. Thank you all so much. I should say one last thing. If any of you want to get any of this done, talk to a woman legislator. She probably knows about me and what's happened.
Thank you, Robin. Now I'd like to introduce Linda Cope. Her son Joshua was injured, I believe, in Afghanistan, and she will tell you his story and her experiences with hyperbaric chamber oxygen.
Hello. Mothers know their children and the pain they go through more than anybody else. Spouses know the pain of their wives, and thank God you were able to stand up and take care of your woman. And it's the caregivers that need to stand in the gap so often for these combat wounded soldiers and their families. My son, November 12th, 2006, was blown up by an IED blast in Iraq. He almost became a triple amputee. He lost both legs above the knee, and he wounded his right hand, his dominant hand. And these past 5 years have been a real struggle. He's got a wife of 8 years, 2 children, and they have 3 children. They just had a little boy about a month ago. And the real struggle we saw began when my son retired, because that's when it hit you that, this is what's left of me. And I'll never forget the day that they always tell you when your son goes outpatient is when the anger will hit. And he took it out on his mom. You can't divorce your mother. And he was in Walter Reed and had never left the campus, and had his wife push him over to where I was at the Marriott Courtyard Hotel, which is where I'm staying now. And he had to push him in the door, and he couldn't get beyond the doorway. And he sat there and he shook and he cried and held me for about an hour and a half. And he said, "Mom, why didn't I die? Look at what is left of me." But he was able to talk about it. And then for years, he tried and tried to do better and better. He couldn't quite get on his prosthetics. He still hasn't done that. But he just wanted to be around his combat wounded buddies. He couldn't get into his new normal. Nobody knows the hell families go through but the families. If you want to know if there's somebody struggling, ask the people with that soldier, because they know. And my husband and I started retreats in Panama City Beach. We brought over 300 soldiers and spouses twice a year. And so we have seen them. They come for 5 days, 4 nights. We cover everything. And their stories are all the same. It's almost textbook. And there's not a soldier that comes there that wouldn't benefit from this, because the wives are struggling. The husbands wake up in the night and they think they're back on the battlefield. They get angry. They lose their tempers. And they don't like the way they are, but they can't seem to be able to change. Some of these women walk out the door. And then what do you have left? A soldier struggling with all these issues. Drugs don't help. We've had so many soldiers on our retreats that have tried to kill themselves. The side effects of a lot of these drugs is suicide. And these are young men. These are kids. Now they're coming back, so many of them, double, triple, quad amputees. My son, through, General Maney, I live in Panama City Beach, Florida, and through these retreats, we got to know Pat, and he talked about the hyperbarics. You never can get a man to go to counseling. If there's any men in here that will, at Walter Reed, they're saying, Joshua, you might need to go to counseling. A lot of these counselors there are wonderful, but they're cute little ladies that have never seen the hell of war. So there's no relation that can go on there. But my son finally decided to go through the hyperbaric treatments. And his wife actually left him twice. And we're a Christian praying family, and we knew God is a faithful God. And she just said, I can't deal with the anger anymore within Josh, because they take it out on the ones they love the most. And she loved him and knew she would stay with him, but she couldn't be around him anymore. And these are the silent hells families go through, that nobody knows what goes on behind those closed doors. But we do. And we would cry and we would pray. And I believe these hyperbarics was an answer to prayers of us and all of our family. Because Joshua finally could sleep at night. He asked his buddies to go back. I want my wife, I want my children, and I want to try something. I've got to try to get better. So he was alone, and they feel so alone. And he started going through the treatments. And he started to be able to sleep at night, to be able to focus, to be able to finish a thought. So many of the things that General Maney was talking about, my son dealt with. And so many of these warriors that have come to our retreats deal with the same thing. And they're coming back in pieces. We as a nation need to do something to heal these men and women. We need to make them whole. And doing this will make it happen. And our son had 40 treatments. And he could laugh again. He could love again. He could let his wife know he loved her. He could sleep in the same bed with her again instead of staying up all night playing video war games. A lot of these soldiers do that. They can't relate to people anymore. And they almost want to get back on the field like they're back in war again. And he went through 40 more treatments. And it's like, I once was blind, but now I see. And we've got our son back. His wife has her husband back. And their little girls have their daddy back. And it means so much to these families. This nation does not need to turn a deaf ear to these families, because there's so much suffering going on that nobody knows about but the families. And we've seen hundreds come through our retreats, and we know their pain. We know they want help, but they don't know what's out there. And I believe if we can educate people to know there is something painless that can literally heal the brain, where they can be whole again, the difference is miraculous. It's miraculous. And I just thank God that there's a group of people that are wanting to do something to give back to a nation with men and women coming back that normally would have died on the battlefield, that need not just to have monetary benefits, but they need to be able to live again, to love again, to feel again. And that's taken away from them when they have these brain injuries. We serve a great nation. We have a nation full of people that know that freedom is not free. And there are so many people that have sacrificed so much. And please support this. Something needs to be done so these families can be whole again. And as a mom that's been through the hell of war, that has sat at Walter Reed and seen my son come back in pieces, but has seen him again helping other wounded warriors. When we had our last retreat, people that had seen him for years said, "Who are you and what have you done with Joshua?" He took ownership of Warrior Beach Retreat, and he was out there talking to soldiers, one that had tried to kill himself 3 times. He was helping. He was sharp. He was there. And people that had seen him for years knew, something's different. What is it? And this needs to be done. It needs to be done. We need to heal. As a nation, we need to come together to bring healing to these that have sacrificed so much for the freedoms that we all enjoy. And it's so simple. We just need to do it. So I thank you all. And, you know, I thank God for these people. I thank God for the hyperbarics. Because without it, I don't know where my son would be. I don't know where his family would be. But it heals the families. It heals the families. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. I'd like to now introduce Brigadier General Dr. Steven Zanakis, who will speak to us a bit about his experience with Bo Som. Bo Som is scheduled to be here, but he probably won't be here till 5 o'clock.
Well, good afternoon. I want to thank Admiral Fanning for putting this together. A lot of work, and to all of you in the panel for your participation and personal courage in sharing your stories and experiences. I'm actually more moved than I thought I would be as I get up here to talk about this. Perhaps much to the dismay of the good secretary here, who's tried to train me over the years to be a good general. He's failed. And I kind of lack a certain containment about this because I'm very, very disappointed in the leadership. And I feel that the leadership missed the diagnosis years ago for what was happening to young soldiers like your son and to a number of others. They're just perhaps coming to it. But for those of us who went through the Vietnam era, I am very, very cynical that the right thing's going to get done. I wrote an article that got published in The Hill a couple months ago that said what we're going to see is Agent Orange deja vu. I think we've got an epidemic here. And I think hundreds of thousands of men and women who the 2.5 million have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, take 20–40% of them, I think, have been hit. And I think we are not giving them the treatment that they deserve. And so the responsibility rests with all of us here. This is another time for a grassroots movement. For all of us who care about those soldiers and Marines and sailors and airmen who've defended our freedoms, given us what we believe in with so much conviction. It's time for us to stand up, and it's got to come from our voice, and we've got to do it. We've got to do it loud, and we can't necessarily just wait to do it through the usual institutions. Now, these are complex patients, and I don't think that Sergeant Somm would mind me telling his story, because it is indicative, sort of like it is for your side. The irony is, the reason I say that I think the diagnosis was missed is we've seen this before. In 1970, I was a patient on Ward 1 at Walter Reed that was the amputee ward. And I was there at a time when in fact the rehab was very, very hard. I went to med school after that and ended up doing internship residency at Letterman, and we saw the first group of guys coming back from Vietnam treated. Their stories are, as you know, as heartbreaking as these. We should have learned and embedded those lessons in our professional practice. Bo Somm is a 34-year-old former sergeant, did 2 tours in Iraq, got hit by multiple IEDs, worked as a medic on one tour, worked as a special operator on another tour, came back, got out, and his life fell apart. And when he got to us, through personal relationships, he was a severe alcoholic. It's probably what he was going to end up dying of, was his alcoholism. And like a lot of young men and women who find their lives just spiraling down, it's not far from waking up one morning and say, you know, if someone else isn't going to take my life, I'm going to do it. And it's just an instant, and everything stops cold. So when he got to us, we saw the alcoholism, we saw the sleep problems, we saw the pain, we saw the anxiety and the depression. And with the great advice and counsel, also my partner, Dr. Mosiani, we set about to put him on what we thought was going to be a recuperative pathway. The first step for us was the hyperbarics, because it was the only treatment we have that in any way heals these injured brains. And we couldn't detox him from his alcohol and make sure he stayed off of it, and then maybe get him into school and education unless his brain was working. It didn't fix his life. But it is what we have available now, and the best, absolutely the best therapy we have available. Getting the brain in shape so that you can do all the other things that need to be done. So he went through 40 sessions. After that, we sent him out to a 4-month detox rehab program. He's gone through that. We have also some other treatments for sleep and anxiety, and he is, as you will see, and we'll see in the video, a functioning and productive, really nice young man. 2 weeks ago, and I will end with this, he referred another young man to us, 22 years old. This soldier was with the 101st Airborne. 4 months after he arrived in Afghanistan, IED blast, lost his left leg below the knee, severely injured his right leg and his left hand. Got air vac back, all the best treatments, got, you know, the $50,000 prosthesis at Walter Reed. And I said, so, blast took off your leg. What did they do about your, did they ask you about how you were doing, how you were thinking? They said, well, they didn't really, this is 2010 now. Well, they did an MRI, didn't show anything. Did anything else occur? Did they test you in any other way? Did they offer you any other therapy? He says, you know, I told them I can't think. I told them I can't remember. I can't concentrate. But they said, you probably don't have a blast. Go see the psychiatrist. I didn't like the psychiatrist. So here I am. That shouldn't happen. But it's going to happen. And I think that what we can do is raise up our voice now, come together, and really thank, again, the league here, and say, well, there's other folks, there are other people out there, and we're glad to take them, and we're glad to help them in the best that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I guess there will be at 5 o'clock a video that will cover the whole range of what's going on with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. But for a moment, I should just make a couple comments. Number one, hyperbaric oxygen therapy is used for all kinds of treatments and has been used for many, many years. I was a hard hat diver with the Navy. I've been down 300 feet in a hyperbaric chamber with mixed oxygen. They're currently using hyperbaric chambers, and this gentleman, Sam Reed, Brunelli, Robin's husband, he just came from being in a hyperbaric chamber. You want to know why, folks? Because he's going in for a major operation tomorrow, and he's gone for 3 treatments before to infuse his body with pressurized oxygen so he will be in the best possible shape to go through this operation that he's facing. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is the only FDA non-hormonal treatment for repair and regeneration of human tissue. The only one. Now, it's used for diabetics who have wounds that cannot be healed. And we were at lunch today, and we were discussing this with some of the people at lunch, and they did not realize that the way this works, folks, it isn't putting oxygen on top of the wound, it's putting it inside the body so the body heals from the inside. It's totally different. So that's really kind of what we're talking about here. We're going to have a couple more presentations, but for those of you that can, make sure you're here for the film will start about 5:45 this evening, but it will cover it, and everything that we've covered here is going to be available, or is available, on the NavyLeague.org. You go to the web page, the first page, and press on HBOT, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and there will be all kinds of things that you can go to learn about it. This is an education process. Now next, I would like to introduce the Honorable Martin Hoffman, who is the past Secretary of Defense under the Ford administration and past General Counsel of the Department of Defense. Marty has been working tirelessly on the HBOT coalition. Marty?
Thank you, sir. And Tim, thank you for getting the Navy League into this game for this presentation here this afternoon. And this is a milestone in our efforts to get this issue out before the public. I want to say just a couple of things. Steve Xenakis is an adherent to the old Washington statement that a briefing in Washington without numbers is like a garden without flowers. I've heard him say it many times. Let me give you some idea of the proportion of the TBI problem. The Army itself will own up to about 216,000 that have been diagnosed with TBI. They don't keep numbers on where they went, how many have been discharged, how many were in treatment, how many received successful treatment. The recent numbers from Afghanistan, and that's the last area of live combat, indicate that over 74% of the casualties are being caused by the so-called IED, the improvised explosive device. Now that device is, Clausewitz is up there in the clouds somewhere just laughing himself to death. Here is an explosive that can be assembled by anyone. Don't need an education at all, has nothing to do with physics. It's mixing fertilizer and fuel oil. The completed number costs less than $50. You can get any jobless Afghan, well not any, but let's say, you can find a number of eager Afghans who will take that device and put it wherever you want it. The going rate is about $23. Okay, so here is the world's mightiest nation losing up to 75% of its casualties in one battle area from one weapon that is not even militarily deployed. It's terrorist deployed. Okay? So one wonders at that point when we would wake up. Now the technology side of the house has not been sleeping. We have seen 4 different families of armored vehicles. We have invested over $10 billion in successive armored vehicles in the battle areas to protect our troops. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Projects Agency, has built for the amputee who has lost his hand, a $100 million project to build a hand that nearly totally replicates the ability of the hand and is powered by a chip in the brain. That is up now for FDA approval. Across there was a whole agency put together called JIADO, the Joint IED Detection and Destruction Office. They have gone through about 5 or 6 billion trying to detect these things, etc. The former commander, General Oates, will be here later in the afternoon. We found in his mission that he was also allowed to mitigate the effects of IEDs. And he tried to bring a program up under his program and was stonewalled in the Department of Defense. So the point is that we may have as many as 600,000 to 650,000 of these individuals. Early in the realization that the weapon was here, and when people saw the blast injuries coming in, I say people there, Walter Reed, they took to looking through the person's record to see if they could find evidence of a personality disorder. And if they could find that, the doctrine was that that makes the person more susceptible to a brain injury, and therefore we don't have to treat them. Now, Senator Kit Bond of Missouri found out about that when there were about 20,000 of these individuals discharged. Out of the Army, general discharge, no benefits. But that soldier had no way to show the Veterans Administration that he was entitled to benefits. The only point I want to make is a very quick point, and that is that the commands appear to know exactly what they're doing. There has been no research and development money for hyperbaric oxygen given out by the Army, who is the executive agency. But if you look carefully, you will see they have also fenced out a number of ancillary treatments that are going to turn out to go well with hyperbaric and other treatments. There has not been, that I have been able to find, a single project funded that aims at brain injury. So it is a problem very deeply founded. I don't think, I've talked to over 300 congressional offices. I don't believe they understand the depth of this experience for the individuals. These soldiers are all volunteers, remember. They all volunteered to go and stand up for us in foreign countries. The risk they took came true for them. The doctors are not willing to take any even small risks, either to treat soldiers on the basis of their needs. The compassionate treatment doctrine, which has been used in field medicine in the Army forever. Where is it? Now, they admitted 4 years ago, when we put the pressure on them, that this was a safe treatment. If it's safe, you've heard the risk that the injured are being exposed to. Why not shift the risk in his direction for a little bit? Okay, we have not been able to get anywhere. We do know that within the VA there was one initiative to treat some of their patients with hyperbaric oxygen, again on a compassionate basis, and it was turned down. What more compassionate patient could you find? What more compassionate case than an individual who has lost 1, 2, 3 limbs? Think of the adjustments in his life, and he is being left with a catastrophic adjustment to make in his brain without treatment. So the urgency is great. It's every bit as great as these distinguished people are telling you. I just want to say one more thing. There are a group of us that have been working this for about 2.5 to 3 years. And I have never been more proud of a group that I've worked with than the people at this table who have stood up day and night, really working and trying to put this across. And we genuinely appreciate your being here and look forward to working with you on this effort. Thank you.
We're going to now bring down a screen. For just 1 minute, I'd like to tell you about a report that was issued just recently by the Military Medical Association. It was done in 2000. It was done in 2011. And after 70 pages of not saying anything, they have 1 page on the treatments, and it's all about TBI. It's a continuum of care for TBI and PTSD by the Department of Defense. They have 1 page on treatments. There are 5 or 6 treatments there. 5 of them are literature reviews. Those aren't treatment, folks. That's people reading journals. There was 1 treatment, and it was called cognitive rehabilitation therapy. That is defined as physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological counseling, and even social work. The same day that I got this big packet, and a quarter page in the Washington Post, there was a report of a new panel that did a literature review. And the literature review was on cognitive rehabilitation therapy. And they issued a 250-page report. Let me tell you what the report said. Cognitive rehabilitation therapy may not be effective for TBI. So all of a sudden, the one thing that they said they were currently doing in the military health system, you can read that TRICARE, but that's what it is. The one thing we were doing was not effective. They said on the next page that hyperbaric oxygen therapy is experimental. Well, folks, you can talk to anyone you want that has had hyperbaric oxygen therapy or been in a hyperbaric chamber, and there are a lot more experimental things like the drugs that people are currently being given that have side effects that I'd be much more worried about. I personally am currently doing some oxygen therapy for a wound, not a wound, but a suture that I had on my leg. So this, folks, is something that we need to get behind. And the reason, they didn't really explain the reason yet. There is nobody, there is no company that is going to make billions of dollars on oxygen. It's not patented, it's not copyrighted. There are plenty of hyperbaric chambers, and we have one of the major builders of hyperbaric chambers here with us today, and he brought the chamber that's out in the hall, Steve Reimers. Stand up, Steve. Say, he's doing the work. But we have 1,100 chambers in hospitals around this country and 100 chambers in clinics that are outside the hospitals. So we have plenty of chambers to do this work. But it's not a big money maker. That's why we need a grassroots effort, and that's why the Navy League is behind supporting this HBOT coalition. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. James Wright, Colonel retired U.S. Air Force. Dr. Wright is the main investigative doctor on one of the 2 observational hyperbaric oxygen clinical trials. They're just been finished up. One should be published next week. We're waiting for Jim's to come out. He will give you a summary of what the clinical study that he's involved in has been doing.
Thank you, Admiral Fanning. And thank you, all of you, for showing up. And I'm really moved also by the stories of the parents, friends of the survivors and the survivors. I'm blessed to, I'm not that bright, but I trained in hyperbaric oxygen, undersea and hyperbaric medicine, directed research for the Air Force for 5 years in hyperbaric oxygen. But it's the Navy who needs the credit. 75 years ago, Captain Benke, United States Navy, pioneered the use of hyperbaric oxygen for brain injury. And here we are today, 75 years later, still struggling. He treated diving injuries, primarily brain injuries, caused by bubbles from nitrogen gas and resultant hypoxia, causing a brain injury very much like TBI. And said it was effective. It only took the Navy 37 years to adopt it.
The Air Force never did.
Well, the Air Force went its own route, but so I'm going to show you a few slides, but I'd rather tell you the stories. See if I can. You know, I knew that injuries to the brain cause disruptions in the neural tracts. And here's an MRI, a fancy image of an NFL player with TBI. And the red areas are places where the nerve tracts in the brain are damaged. These are repaired with hyperbaric oxygen. Pretty simple. You know, you saw some chambers. We know that it works for a variety of indications. Some of these are brain injuries, carbon monoxide poisoning, a brain injury, arterial gas embolism, a brain injury, brain infection, a brain injury. We've been doing this for years. I didn't mentally make the connection with TBI right away. And it works on the cell. 8,000 methods that we know about that are affected in the cell by hyperbaric oxygen. So we know how it works. We decided to do a trial. Well, before that happened, I ended up in special operations in the Air Force. I was blessed to know many of the fine people that I worked with. And these two airmen showed up in my office. They've been blown up. They're on their way out of the Air Force, forcing in medical evaluation board, going to be kicked out. Why? They couldn't work. They couldn't think. They couldn't remember their routes. They're convoy truck drivers. Couldn't remember their combinations. Doing a poor job. They're going to get kicked out for sure. Getting their medical board. Dr. Eddie Zant, a saint, the one who treated Pat Maney and Joshua Cope, I knew, Fort Walton, that's where I was stationed. He finds one of them getting a Purple Heart in the paper. Says, you need to get this kid in, and he has a TBI and treat him. Says, okay. I call him in. Wives come in. The wives are distressed. Their husbands are not the same people they used to be. So I told those boys, okay, Dr. Zant said he'll treat you for free. I'm going to send you down to get treated. Took a little coaxing. They'd never heard of hyperbaric oxygen. They went. Eddie Zant treated them, and they became completely well, retained their job, and to this day they're on active duty in the Air Force. We wrote those two kids up, and that was the beginning. And then when I retired, I didn't have anything to do, so they made me the principal investigator. But we decided we would do this. I would do that for them for this trial, which was already started. Dr. Mosiani, Steve Reimers, Rob Beckman, Steve Zanakis put this together. It's an observational trial just to see how hyperbaric oxygen works, to answer a couple questions. Does it work for brain injury, for TBI? So is it effective, and is it safe? And the answer for both of those is yes. 8 of these people that we've treated so far are active duty. They've been in all services: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, all the services. And TBI doesn't discriminate what service you're in. 11 veterans, so more than half were active duty or veterans, the rest civilians. Nobody had a complication or adverse effect. Nobody. Well, let's put that to rest, that it's safe. Okay, I'll just show you a couple of tests. I'd rather tell you the stories, but when one of these neuropsych tests, we ask people how they're doing, called ANAP, and we noticed, and these are all improvements, that people are sleeping better, their sleep disturbances are largely gone. We had an instructor in our special ops who was crabby all the time. Well, it turned out this young man had not slept more than 2 hours a night for 3 years. No wonder he was crabby. And Eddie Zant treated him, and he was able to sleep 8 hours uninterrupted. They're more vigorous, their depression is down, their anger, fatigue is down, their anxiety is improved, less of that, and they're much happier. That's just the mood stuff. If we look at how the brain thinks, we don't need to know the fancy details of these brain tests, but these are objective measurements of how well are you doing. Can you remember stuff in the short-term memory? Can you make your eye-hand coordination work better? That type of thing. And those are all improved. Every patient we've treated in this protocol has improved. Some people have become completely well. I challenge you to find another treatment that does that for brain injury. Another neurological test, same results. Everybody improved in nearly every measure. And we asked people how they're doing. Are they back to normal? And they start to get in the 80% back to normal situation. They start out at 40, 50% of their functioning capacity. They're not 100% like with these people. I expect they'll continue to improve. And not everybody got all the treatments we would have liked to give them. This is all done pro bono. No one's getting paid for this. That's a telling slide. If you look at the last box on your right, thoughts that you would be better off dead or hurting yourself. Almost zero. This is not done with drugs. These depressed people are much less depressed. They have hope. And it's all very nice when we talk about big numbers and epidemics and stuff, and I truly believe that. But one of these people is in your family, or a friend of yours is hurt, and that person has hope, and joy in their life and is able to interact with their loved ones again, it's worth everything in the world. Quality of life improved. This river meat tested a bunch of their physical symptoms. Those are all better. So what we've learned, everybody we've treated has gotten better. The improvement is durable. It lasts for years. Yes, some people who are a little worse off may need a touch-up treatment a couple of years later, a few dies, 5 or 10, to get them back to where they were. We think the earlier you treat, the better. And I believe what Dr. Zanaka said is very true. We're going to see Agent Orange all over again. Remember what happened in Vietnam. And look at what's happening in the NFL. 20 years out, all these lives will have come apart, and we're going to deal with the consequences. That's not the time to treat. The time to treat is now. And we think, it's my personal opinion, that the great bulk of the PTSD we're labeling people with is really traumatic brain injury, PTSD symptoms. We treat the brain injury, a lot of that PTSD will disappear. Okay, we want to do a FDA trial. That's the next step, so we can get the FDA label saying that this is effective. Then all the insurance companies will start to pay for it. And that's the next step. But it goes home. This is my son, Corporal Eddie Wright, United States Marine, or Sergeant Eddie Wright now, U.S. Marine Corps. Eddie had TBI too, and we treated him. We begged them to treat him for his leg infection at Walter Reed. They would not. And so Dr. Zant treated Eddie too, and Eddie got better from his TBI. And so it's nice to talk about statistics, but when it comes home to roost, when it's a friend or family member, then we have to do something. And we have done something, not as much as we wanted to, but God bless all the people that helped us do it, and I hope this effort will continue. Thank you.
Not about money, folks. This is about truly healing the brain. And the only way it's going to happen, the way we see it, is by a full grassroots movement where we get together, all the associations, and many of the corporations involved in the industrial military complex, and make this happen by force of numbers. We're not going to do it by any other way, because nobody makes money on this. That's about it. If anyone has any questions, our next event will start at about 5 o'clock. If anyone has any questions of our panel members, otherwise they will be around and available for you to talk to as soon as I get off the stage. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is George Metz. I'm with the Mike Novosel Foundation, and we sent 2 of our soldiers down with Pat Maney to get the hyperbaric treatment. One young man was on 17 meds. After the treatment, he is on 5. He was on methadone, 4 antidepressants, and 4 sleeping pills, and the kid wasn't sleeping. Since has gone down. Matter of fact, Tony was supposed to be here today, but for some reason he didn't come.
Sir, if you'd like to speak, maybe if you come up at the microphone, it'll be picked up.
Please do, George.
Come on, George. It isn't a question. It's a story. It's a story, and you can ask.
Question and a comment.
Go right ahead.
Like I said, my name is George Metz. I'm with the Mike Novosel Foundation. We sent 2 soldiers down to be treated. The young man I was referring to was supposed to be here today, but he's not here, and why I don't know. I've tried calling him. He kind of gets a little antsy around crowds. But he was taking 17 meds, 4 or 5 for antidepressant, 3 or 4 for sleeping. He wasn't sleeping. He went down for the treatment. He came back. He's on 5 meds. And my question to this is, what's it costing me as a taxpayer to put him on those 17 meds a day? And the quality of life that he has. Now that he's on 5 meds, future down the road, am I going to be paying for his kidney transplant and his liver transplant or dialysis? And what's that costing me versus what's this costing me for hyperbaric? And I don't know why the Congress or FDA or get off their butts and do something. I mean, this is people. I'm a Vietnam vet, and I know what that's like. And I just suffered in 2007. I suffered a traumatic brain injury. I was helping a guy cut trees down. I got drug in to the outrigger on the truck, and I wound up with 4 broken ribs, 3 vertebrae, 2 skull fractures, and a separated shoulder, and a partridge in a pear tree. But
Tree work, don't do any more tree work.
and I haven't gone through the treatment, so I know how frustrating it is when you're trying to come up with a word. The other day I was trying to come up with blackberry, and I could not come up with that word. I met Pat Maney down at Walter Reed when I was visiting Mr. Novosel, who was a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient. And before Pat went through his treatment. And he's sitting back on the bench today as a judge. This works, and I don't know why the VA or whoever, other than the drug manufacturers, paying a lot of money to a lot of people to stop this. And I think it should be, Congress should look into it. I've talked to my congressman, who is a naval officer. He's a congressman. He was in Iraq or Afghanistan, I don't remember which, and he got blown up. And he's a psychologist. And that's Tim Murphy. And I don't know why everybody's stonewalling this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments very much.
Yeah. Folks, part of the idea of what the next step is it's an education process. And we need to educate the people who support the military from the different organizations about it. For some of you who are here, this may be the first time you've heard this story. For others, you may not have heard the full story. But if we can get the full story out in an education process, it will be hard to have the stonewalling that has been described to you by George and other people. Doctor?
Well, I thank you, and because I think you've hit on some really important points here, having to do with, in generally, the problem of what is called polypharmacy in the practice within any number, not just the VA and the DoD, but a lot of it's focusing on that, where you've got any number of these soldiers, these patients are put on, and I've seen it many times walking through the Malone House, put on 15 plus medications. And we don't know what the interaction is, we're treating side effects, we're really kind of chasing our tail. We don't do something which is wash out people and then get them into a baseline and then give them a particular kind of treatment like this and watch them, and that has to change. And I think, again, practitioners can be influenced to change it as you tell your kind of story. We get patients that say, you know, doc, I don't want to take drugs. You know, part of the reason they don't want to see a psychiatrist is the only thing that's going to happen is that they're going to end up getting drugs. So they want to get something else. So I appreciate your comments.
Okay, yes, go ahead. Stuart.
Stuart Reuter from the Northern Virginia Council of Navy League. Just as a matter of interest, what would a series of 40 hyperbaric treatments cost if you were in the business of providing that service?
Do you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, at our clinic, we are charging $250 per session, so it'd be $10,000. And then you have the other lab work and the workup. So for your first series, it'd be, let's say, probably 12 to 15,000, depending on the lab, for the whole treatment.
Okay, yes, one more question.
Over how much time? Those 40 sessions, how were they?
They can be done within a month.
And depending on who you're treating and what their situation is, you will see some effects after 40 treatments, substantial effects. Some people don't need more than that, at least initially. Well, I'd like to...
You've got one question.
Yes, what other question back there?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Actually, I was going to direct it back to you. My name is Major Bob Likens. I'm on Congressman Thornberry's staff as a fellow. The House has put money into this year's Defense Authorization Act in order to try and fund essentially through backdoor or alternative means, fund treatments such as this. You have a lot more interaction with the Senate side even than we do. Is it your impression that the Senate's going to be supportive of that, or is that something that, as grassroots activists, you need to be calling the Senate on now when they go to conference?
Well, thank you for the question. He's talking about the so-called Sessions Amendment to the Defense Authorization Bill. It's been passed twice now in successive Congresses by the House. And so the Senate taking up the same bill is a hope we have to have the same amendment put in the bill. Then there's no conference, there's no more controversy. The amendment itself requires either the VA or the DOD to pay for a treatment to a brain-injured or other injured veteran, other vet who comes in. And if that treatment is successful, it requires the DOD and the VA to pay. Now you can imagine the DOD and the VA are fighting this. So we don't know what's going to happen. Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma has been very interested in this. He has taken it up with the Senate bill in committee, not successfully yet, and has indicated that he's going to try to get, that he has an agreement to get it into the bill this time. We're just going to see how that comes out. I heard today that the committee regards the bill as reported out to the Senate, and that the Senate will take it up tomorrow. Okay, so we'll be working with the committee leadership to see if that's the case and see if we can get it in. Now, if they do not put it in, it's still in the House side of the bill, and the Senate's going to have to reckon with it. So work has to be done on both sides to get the Senate conferees to acquiesce and accept it into the bill, but to really get the House conferees to get in there and hold their own. And as you say, the focus is going to be on the conferees themselves, which will be from the Armed Services Committees. But we're going to need a real push to hold what we have there. Thank you for the question.
Just so you know, you can go, as I said before, to NavyLeague.org and press on HBOT, and there'll be a tab where you can write your congressman about this specific bill. If it goes to conference, we want everybody to write their congressman and senator and get their attention on the TBI bill. There's actually 3 sections, and that's covered in the Navy League website for that. And again, that'll all be in the movie. Last question.
That was my question. Where can we go to get information on the progress of the bill? That website will keep us posted?
That website will tell you how to contact your congressman and what is the next step.
Somebody will be reporting like what's going on and what we should be doing to get it through?
Yes, if you go to the website, it will actually go to, I think, Steve's website, where they're working on it, and we're feeding and working with him on information for that. So a whole list of websites you can go to learn about HBOT, but there is one specifically to contact your congressman through the NavyLeague.org.
And where's his website listed?
It's listed on the list with that. You all, there's in the package that you will receive, there's also detailed information on the bill. Thank you all. We have to break this room down a little bit for the next event. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you had quite an education on HBOT. And thank you very much for the panel. About money, folks. This is about truly healing the brain. And the only way it's going to happen, the way we see it, is by a full grassroots movement where we get together, all the associations and many of the corporations involved in the industrial military complex, and make this happen by force of numbers. We're not going to do it by any other way, because nobody makes money on this. That's about it. If anyone has any questions, our next event will start at about 5 o'clock. If anyone has any questions of our panel members, otherwise they will be around and available for you to talk to as soon as I get off the stage. Any questions?